Hi everyone, thanks for being here and attending this session at Microsoft Build 2025. We're going to be discussing how to unlock cloud migration success using modern strategies for moving to the cloud. My name is Jason Hand and I'm a Senior Developer Advocate at Datadog, primarily focusing on infrastructure, platform, AI, and cloud. Now, I'm assuming the reason you're here today is that you're likely considering a move to the cloud and wondering about the benefits and the reasoning behind such an undertaking. Today, we'll address these key questions and we'll explore what's involved in a cloud migration success. While putting together this presentation, I came across some interesting data that I wanted to share. There's a recent Gartner report that shows cloud adoption is booming. Probably no real big surprise there. Their 2024 forecast shows public cloud spending was expected to jump by over 20% last year alone, hitting $678 billion. That's a huge leap from the previous year's numbers. Most of you probably aren't shocked that more and more companies are moving to the cloud. Today, we'll talk about why organizations make this move, but we'll also be real about the challenges that you might face along the way. We'll cover both the good and the not so simple aspects of cloud migration. That same Gartner report I mentioned highlights several barriers to cloud migration. They actually list quite a few, but let's focus on just the big three obstacles first. The first one being application size. This one's pretty straightforward. Large, complex applications that you've built over the years can be challenging to move. The sheer size and complexity means that you have a lot more to consider during your migration. Heavy customization. If you've built a highly customized tech stack that's tailored specifically to your needs, that can make cloud migration tricky. All those custom features and configurations don't always transfer smoothly to cloud environments. And the last one, insufficient skills. This is a big one that we're going to focus on today. Cloud migration requires specialized knowledge, whether you're moving to Azure or any cloud provider. Many organizations struggle simply because they don't have the team members with previous cloud migration experience. We'll spend most of our time addressing the skills gap and hopefully give you the knowledge foundation that you need for successful migration. For those of you still wondering if cloud migration is worth the effort, let's look at some of the compelling reasons that organizations are consistently reporting benefits. The first one being scalability. Next, reliability, security, cost optimization, and finally, freeing up resources. We'll dig deeper into each one of these benefits next. Let's break down a few key elements of scalability. The first thing that people think of in terms of benefits for scalability is elasticity, which means that you can scale resources automatically, up during busy times and down during quiet times. No manual effort, and you save money. Another benefit of scalability is the global reach, which lets you run applications closer to your users, wherever they are. That means lower latency and a better user experience. Another benefit is cost efficiency. You only pay for what you use, so no more over-provisioning or big upfront investments. Flexibility is another aspect of scalability, which gives you access to a huge range of services, from compute and storage to AI and analytics, and clouds such as Azure can support hybrid and multi-cloud setups. And last, performance and reliability. Built-in load balancing and smart resource management keeps things running smoothly and consistently. These are some of the key benefits that you think of when we're talking about scalability. Now let's look at reliability. In terms of reliability, we often think of high availability, meaning if one region goes down, traffic automatically shifts elsewhere, so your services stay up and running. Disaster recovery is something else too that's built in, with things like automated backups and geo-replication to help you recover quickly if something goes wrong. Scalable infrastructure keeps performance steady during traffic spikes or failures without over-provisioning. Proactive monitoring and maintenance means issues are caught faster and updates happen automatically, which leads to less manual work for your team. And last, with security and compliance, you get features like multi-factor auth and threat detection, along with support for industry standards to keep your environment secure. Another reason people consider moving to the cloud is around security. One of the first things that people think of is the advanced security measures that you get, such as encryption, identity management, and network controls that are built in to protect against modern threats. Expertise and resources are on demand, meaning that you have 24-hour, 7-day-a-week monitoring by dedicated security teams, plus built-in compliance and standards like HIPAA and GDPR. Scalable security lets you grow your defenses as your environment expands without needing big new investments. And disaster recovery backups ensure your data stays safe and recoverable, even during outages or failures. And with continuous monitoring and response, threats can be detected and addressed in real time, often before they become real problems. The next group, optimized costs. Let's take a quick look here. One of the first things that people think about in terms of benefits is the pay-as-you-go pricing, which means you only pay for what you use. There's no big upfront investments or hardware to maintain. Reduced infrastructure costs come from offloading servers, storage, and networking to the cloud provider. Operational efficiency improves with automation. Tasks like backups and updates will run on their own, saving your team time. And energy savings, something that a lot of us are starting to think a lot more about lately. Cloud data centers are much more efficient, which helps lower your utility cost and support sustainability goals. Improved budgeting and forecasting is easier with built-in tools that track usage and costs in real time. And finally, reduced downtime costs mean fewer disruptions. High availability and quick recovery help keep productivity and revenue on track. Now, let's talk about freeing up some of our team's resources, including the people. Reduced infrastructure management means no more dealing with hardware patches or upgrades. It's all handled for you, leaving you to focus on core business objectives by automating the routine stuff like scaling and backups, so your team can spend more time on meaningful projects. Access to advanced tools and services like AI, analytics, and DevOps gives your team what they need to move faster and build smarter. Enhanced collaboration and integration comes from built-in tools and easy third-party integrations that streamline teamwork and workflows. Improved DevOps practices with built-in CI/CD, observability, and infrastructure as code help speed up delivery and boost reliability. And finally, enhanced resource allocation lets you redirect time and energy from maintenance to strategic, high-impact work. Okay, so that's enough about the why, and for many of you, that's probably more of a review. You've already thought through the reasons, and you've made the decision to move to Azure. Now you're here because you want to know, how do I actually do this? So let's talk about it. One thing you'll hear from just about anyone who's been through a cloud migration or any kind of digital transformation is that when you ask, how do we do this? The answer is almost always, it depends. And yeah, that's not always the most satisfying answer, but it's an honest one. The truth is, it really does depend. Every business is different. Your applications, your infrastructure, your teams, the way everything is set up, all of that is unique, so there's no one-size-fits-all approach to the migration. That said, just because every migration is different doesn't mean that we can't develop solid strategies to help guide the process. The key is figuring out the right course of action for your specific situation, your own unique cloud journey. If you head to your favorite search engine and you look up something like cloud migration strategies, you're probably going to come across this concept of the R's. You've got the 5 R's, the 6 R's, the 7 R's, and honestly, there may be more. The 5 R's originally came from Gartner, and the 6 and 7 R's are strategies from different cloud providers that they've provided over the years for best practices. In the screenshot here, you'll see how many variations people have shared, but for today, I've pulled out some of the most common ones that I hear in a lot of real-world scenarios. The first one, and probably the most familiar to many of you, is the lift and shift approach, which is often referred to as rehosting. This strategy is all about moving your application as is to the cloud with little to no changes. You're basically picking up what you've already got and placing it into a cloud environment. It's often seen as the easiest place to start, and in many cases, it makes a lot of sense. But as you'll find, there's still quite a bit of effort involved to make sure it's done right. Now, as you can see in this screenshot, Random people on the internet are quick to point out that lift and shift can often be the most expensive way to approach your migration. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's a wrong choice for you, but it's definitely something to consider. If you go this route, you might not be fully taking advantage of the cloud's features. Things like elasticity, automation, and cost optimization. So while it can be the fast way to get started, it may not always be the most efficient or cost-effective in the long term. So if you're not going to go with the rehost or lift and shift, another option to consider is replatforming. Replatforming is definitely more complex. It requires more planning, more time, and usually some cloud expertise on your team. You're not just moving the application as is, you're making some changes to better take advantage of the cloud environment without completely rebuilding everything from scratch. The third option I want to share is called repurchasing. Now, this is often a bit quicker than replatforming and can require less effort overall. It usually involves moving to a SaaS or SaaS-like solution in the cloud. That means you get the benefits of a managed service and a faster migration. But there are trade-offs. You'll have new dependencies on that provider and potentially higher ongoing costs, depending on how the service is priced. Another strategy to consider is re-architecting. This means you're completely redesigning your application to be cloud native. And for a lot of teams, this is what we mean when we talk about digital transformation. You're taking the hard steps now, rebuilding your app to be structured for the cloud, so you're set up for long-term success. But this does come with trade-offs as well. You'll need cloud experts, and it can be time-consuming and expensive depending on the scope of work. Next is the retain strategy. This is basically saying we're going to keep the service as is. You're not moving it to the cloud, at least for now. Maybe it doesn't make sense to migrate this particular piece, so you just leave it where it is and look for other opportunities to leverage cloud services elsewhere in your stack. And finally, there's retire. As you start evaluating what to migrate, you might come across services or systems that just aren't adding much value anymore. And in some cases, it might make more sense to simply shut them down. This is something that often gets overlooked. Teams end up maintaining services in both environments, on-prem and in the cloud, when some of those services don't really need to exist anymore. So it might be time to just say goodbye and move on. Now, there are tools that you should follow when it comes to the step-by-step for migrating to Azure. There's a tool called Azure Migrate, and this is the best place to go and use the tools that Azure has built for you to actually migrate all of your systems over in one effort. Now, that being said, there are lots of resources out there that can help you understand a little bit more about what your own cloud journey is. In fact, I want to share with you a few things that I think might help you understand what those might be. We've got a use case, or I guess I would say a case study post here that I wanted to share with you, and this will be in the resources at the end, that really help you understand why you might want to consider moving to the cloud, but also some of the things that some of our customers have run into as they move into Azure. So take a look at that resource. It'll be in the links provided at the end. And then another link that I've provided with you as well is around the best practices for monitoring your cloud migration. This is a blog post that we have. And the post explores, like I said, the best practices for monitoring your cloud migration and showing you how to create visibility throughout every phase, including the planning phase, including the migration phase, and everything in between. So let's go take a look. The pre-migration strategies that I want to share with you here are just things that can help you help set you up for success and avoid a lot of unnecessary headaches later on. One of the things I like to point out here is this quote, which I really love. Someone shared this with me and said it was from Benjamin Franklin, but after a bit of Googling, it turns out that there's really no solid evidence that he actually said it, but I still think that it holds up. If you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. And that's really one of the key takeaways here today, is that before you jump into a migration, take the time to plan, think about what you're migrating, why, and how, so that when it's time to take action, you're setting yourself up for a more smoother, more successful journey. And boy, is it a journey. Now, as you begin planning your migration, there are a couple of additional resources that I'd like to direct you to regarding the Azure Cloud Adoption Framework, which is something that is going to be critical in you understanding your own cloud journey. Now, what I'm going to share with you next comes from some of these resources here, the Cloud Adoption Framework, both Datadog's version of that as well as Azure's. So the first thing when you're looking through those steps that we suggest that you do when you're in your migration phase is to enable the integrations for Azure. And when it comes to integrations, Datadog has something like 850 of them. So whatever you're using, there's a good chance we got it. You can also create your own customs, but naturally we have all of the Azure stuff covered here. So you'll see a long list of Azure stuff if you just type in Azure there in the search bar. And starting here gives you your first real immediate visibility into your Azure services, what you're running, and lays a solid foundation for monitoring your migration and your ongoing operations. Once you've got that integration set up, our next piece of advice, the next step we'd like for you to explore, is setting up tags. If you check out the Datadog documentation, we've got some really solid recommendations for the kinds of tags that you should be using. And a few key ones to consider here are: what is the environment that this resource is running in? So your environment tag. What is the version of this? So the version tag. And then which team is responsible for it? And we'll take a look at why the team is important in a moment. Having this kind of tagging in place makes a big difference during migration, and it helps you understand what you're looking at and how things are grouped. And maybe most importantly, this is why the team tagging is important. Who's responsible for each piece of that infrastructure? That clarity is huge when things get busy or if something needs attention quickly. Now, once you've got your tagging strategy in place, the next step is to set up your dashboards. So dashboards are always fun to dive into, and during a migration, they can be super helpful because they can help you with visibility into the resources that you're trying to move over and what their status is. It helps ease concerns, giving you confidence that everything is behaving as expected and lets you spot issues quickly. You can also set up monitoring and alerting directly from those dashboards. So if something needs your attention, you'll know right away. And this is a big part of staying on top of the migration process. And as we mentioned a little bit earlier, setting up clear communication channels, especially for incident response, that's something that you definitely don't want to overlook. During a migration, things can go wrong, whether it's performance issues, misconfigurations, or unexpected downtime. Knowing who needs to be looped in, how to escalate, and where those conversations should take place is absolutely critical. Making those decisions before anything happens helps you respond faster and keeps the migration process running more smoothly. Now let's talk about the migration steps. We always recommend starting by installing the Datadog agent because it helps eliminate any gaps in observability that you might have about your migration process. Once the agent is installed and your integrations are in place, you can start taking advantage of things like adding integrations to collect Datadog specific stuff to the technologies your services are employing, or enabling application performance monitoring to measure the request counts and latency or error rates of your services, or capturing the logs generated by your environment to gain deeper context into what your metrics and your traces are doing. And then last here, enabling cloud network monitoring to ensure efficient communication between your services. And having the agent deployed gives you the visibility before, during, and after the migration so that you're not flying blind at any point during the process. It really helps gives you that full picture of how everything is actually performing. All right, so once you have your health data flowing in, the real value comes from being able to visualize it and then interpret it. Having that clear visibility into your environment, whether that's through the host, a container service, network maps, whatever that may be, but it doesn't really matter. But having those pre-built dashboards are a great starting point so that you have real information in front of you. And at the end of the day, having that information is going to help you make decisions and drive better decisions and smoother transitions moving forward. Now, when something does go wrong, because let's be honest, something's going to go wrong, you want to make sure that you're sending actionable alerts to the right people, like we talked about earlier, making sure it goes to the right channels. And this ties back to the monitoring stuff that we talked about earlier. It's not just about knowing something failed. It's about making sure that the alert gets to the right team or individual with the context that they need to take action quickly. That's what turns an alert into something useful and not just noise. Now, let's talk about proactive synthetic tests. This is another area that we really encourage you to explore during your migration process. Synthetic tests really help teams understand the different ways things can fail before they actually do. By simulating different scenarios like latency spikes, drop connections, or service outages, you can see how your systems are going to respond. And that insight gives you a better sense of what the migration process looks like and helps you prepare for potential issues before they actually impact users. And the last suggestion that we have here in the migration steps is to set up or configure your service level objectives, or your SLOs. And setting SLOs helps you define what, quote, good performance looks like for your services, whether that's uptime, latency, error rates, or something else. And once those targets are in place, you can track whether your system is meeting expectations, especially after a migration, so you can stay aligned with your business and your users' needs. Now, I want to share another resource with you. It's a full ebook dedicated to this topic that we've put out titled Migrate to Azure Without Disruption. And it takes many of the concepts that we've covered here today and expands on them in more detail, as you can imagine. And a lot of the strategies and best practices that we've talked about today do hold true across the board, regardless of your cloud journey. And I want to just encourage you to take a look at that book and give it a read, and then compare it to some of the things that we talked about with the Azure Cloud Adoption Framework, and see if that helps you figure out a nice little journey playbook on what you'll need to do with your situation. All right, so just a couple of final takeaways here before we wrap up. So I want to leave you with this. Discuss some of the strategies and the things that we've talked about here with your teams when you have a chance, and go back and have those conversations and take a look at the Cloud Adoption Framework and try to compare the different things that they've laid out to your own situation and see what makes the most sense for your team, for your journey, for your organization, and the things that you're trying to do. Similar to that, I encourage you to go take a look at the Azure migration tool that I mentioned. This is going to be your number one resource for actually moving the services that you're talking about, or that you're thinking about moving. All of the other pre-migration steps, all that stuff that I talked about, is really to help you before, during, and after. But the actual migration steps of moving files, moving services, you're going to want to use the Azure migration tool. They've got a lot of great resources, including docs that I've included in our links as well. I also encourage you to take a look at some of that other complementary material, the case studies and the blogs, both because they do contain some great information that goes into more detail than we had time here for today, but because they also, I think, can help you identify your own cloud journey. It's always nice to hear from other companies and other teams and what they're doing, and sort of, I guess, compare notes on what your situation is. So go read that complementary material. And then think about your pre-migration steps that we've talked about here, where we're going to go into this planning phase of understanding, which integrations we need. Obviously, we want to integrate the Azure integration, but there may be others that we want to integrate. Let's talk about tags with our team. What is our tagging strategy? What kind of dashboards do we want to set up for clear visibility into what's happening during the migration? And then also, what do we want to do when something goes wrong? Because, like I said, something probably will go wrong, so we should be prepared for that. And then when you actually start to migrate, the steps are pretty clear, pretty similar, regardless of the cloud, is that you're going to install the Datadog agent. Once you have that, then we're going to actually implement some of those dashboards that we talked about in the planning phase, as well as setting up any kind of monitors that we might need. And then from there, we're going to get proactive and start putting in some synthetic tests to actually help us understand what the system's going to do under certain conditions. And then last, we'll set some SLOs, our service level objectives, and make sure that everything's in place there so that we're moving in the right direction. All right, so some final thoughts here. Remember that every migration is unique. You've probably heard that a million times now, but it's worth repeating over and over. Your cloud journey is your own, and it's really hard to apply a one-size-fits-all, step-by-step guide to something as complex and individual as a cloud migration. That's why I tend to avoid phrases like best practices, because without knowing your specific situation, your apps, your infrastructure, your team, it wouldn't be fair to tell you that there's just one right way to do things. And that's exactly where frameworks like what we've talked about today can really help. They're designed to give you a structure but yet be flexible enough that you can tailor the approach to your own needs. And the last big takeaway I'll leave you with is this: no matter where you are in your journey, make sure that you understand your applications and your infrastructure and even your costs before you migrate. That knowledge is going to be key in helping you plan effectively, avoid surprises, and set yourself up for a smooth, successful transition to the cloud. Thank you so much for joining this session today. You can visit this QR code to download today's slides, as well as check out all of the resources that we talked about today. And I've included some of the big ones here on this slide as well. And with that, I thank you very much for your time. It's been a real pleasure being part of Microsoft Build 2025, and we'll see you next time. Bye.